Welcome back to the channel. I am with John Wedger. John Wedger, who is an ex-Scotland Yard detective who campaigns tirelessly for the justice for victims and survivors of childhood abuse. Hello, John. How are you?
Hello, mate. All good, Luke. All good.
Nice to speak to you. I'm intrigued about the conversation we're going to have today. Me and John are going to be speaking about child abuse, the effects of child abuse, what happens to victims as they grow up and mature, what it has on their effects on their lives. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please, John, for anyone who doesn't know.
I'm predominantly known for my role in speaking out about child abuse and child abuse cover-ups. That's sort of how I come to notice. And my long-term service as a Metropolitan Police detective, working in the field of vice and child abuse and child prostitution. And the sort of work I do now is I work a lot with ex-offenders and try and steer them away from crime. And I do a lot of campaigning for people who are trying to seek justice for the trauma they suffered through childhood neglect and abuse.
And you were a former Scotland Yard detective, is that right?
Yeah. I served with the Metropolitan Police all my service. I did get seconded out. I ended up doing work with the National Crime Squad, as it was back then, and various other agencies. But the Scotland Yard thing comes from when you become a detective and you work on what's called central squads, which tend to have their offices in the big tower block that used to be New Scotland Yard. And
Okay.
that's sort of how we got the term, like, yard detectives.
Right. So do you basically, is working for Scotland Yard almost like a step up from, is it like a hierarchy thing in the police?
Well, to become a detective, you have to take a very hard exam, which is tougher than a sergeant's promotion exam, and then from that, you have to have proven investigative experience, which could take quite a while. So, although your pay grade is the same, so you still go by the hierarchy of constable, sergeant, inspector, but that is just sort of like with a little add-on, preceding it, of detective. But without a doubt, it is a promotion. It's sort of like an unofficial promotion, and we saw ourselves really as better than the uniform coppers. Uniform policing for me, no, it was good. It was fun, driving fast cars and chasing people and all that. But that soon loses its taste.
Is it more detective work with the Scotland Yard? They're more actually kind of, connecting dots and more of an investigator. Is that kind of how it is?
Well, everything's in sort of levels, in tiers, and it's all compartmentalized. So to be a detective, you leave the uniform branch and then you move to the CID. And every police station back then had a CID office, so you would investigate local crimes. But some crimes couldn't be kept locally; they had to be given to a squad, which is where the Scotland Yard stuff come in. So, for example, you might get a burglar that's going around sort of what we call it drumming, robbing people's houses locally, and you could deal with that. But they might start linking up with other burglars, and they might start going out to the counties, to the provincial regions, and they start going sort of cross-border, and then that would have to then move on to something like the National Crime Squad.
What is it that you advocate for now? I know we've briefly touched on the kind of child abuse, raising awareness. So what's your day-to-day ongoings these days? What do you get up for every day? What's the message you're trying to spread?
Well, I mean, I work with a lot of offenders, and I know, because I specialised in child abuse, and I worked on vice. I worked on the street a lot with child prostitutes, sexual offending against kids, paedophilia, these sort of crimes. And it takes a certain mindset, it takes a certain resilience in an individual, because it's very, very emotionally impactful. There's no smiles in that unit. It's incredibly hard work, and it's very much under-resourced and underfunded. 80% of the prison system in this country, the male prison population, have come from abusive childhood backgrounds. So it is without a doubt the single most detrimental factor, right, to people's mental health and their offending that we have. And that won't just be in this country, that'll be around the world. And
That's interesting. So there's a big link between being abused as a child and then ending up in prison yourself and offending.
and suicide and drug
Yeah.
addiction. I mean, especially when it comes to sexual abuse, you'll find a lot of heroin addicts have come from sexual abuse. Not all of them. This isn't anything I say is not a catch-all, because there's always
Yeah.
exceptions to rules. Sexual abuse doesn't have any boundaries. So you will get paedophiles that are Christian, that are Protestant, that are Jewish, that are Muslim, that are this, that are that, that are white, that are black, they are ginger, they are everything.
That are billionaires.
Billionaires, and they will come from every economic background, every social strata, every religious denomination, and every ethnicity. That you will find paedophiles and sexual abusers of children. And then you start getting deeper involved in it. And one of the things that I did start really looking at was a thing called SRA, Satanic Ritual Abuse. And that in itself takes it to another level. And once you understand satanic ritual abuse, you start understanding connections that ordinarily would slip through the net. How do these people know each other? Why is there a need for someone to help someone come forward and things like that? Because it's their little secret. And this is how secret societies work, and little clubs and perverse groups. This is how they all work, because they have a need to protect each other and do each other favors. And there is a huge blackmail element to this as well.
Something that caught my attention then was the word satanic and the rituals. What's that? What's going on there?
It's ancient, and it's abuse of children, it's neglected children, it's rape of children, but it's all done in the name of a deity, a negative deity. It's gone on since time began, and it's never abated, never ever abated. And the rituals are ancient, and it doesn't matter whether you what part of the world that comes from. The demonic world, it's spiritual as well, and the spirits demand the blood. So that's why there's always a blood sacrifice. Sex is used, paedophilia is used, and there's a need to destroy God's creations, which are the children. So children are very much the target of this. We've just had a case that's gone on in the High Court in Glasgow, where 11 people have been found guilty of child rape, child abuse, child torture, all under the guise of satanic rituals. And there's been many cases that have been in the Crown Courts in the UK in the past couple of decades. I think there's a dozen of them or so that have really made prominence. And it's alluded to all the time in Hollywood. You've got films like Rosemary's Baby, you've got Eyes Wide Shut, The Wicker Man, many, many, many films that always allude to the reality of satanic ritual abuse. And it does get reported to the police. However, our legal system, our indictable crime, doesn't see Satanism and abuse within Satanism as an aggravating factor. It will just deal with the indictments that are committed, which could be animal torture, child torture, and rape and buggery. Buggery is, a common tool that is used in satanic abuse, and they have their own calendar.
How do you come about this information? Is this just through detective work? Is this research, or how do you come about knowing these sort of things?
Well, it would get reported, but of course, like I said, the police won't deal with it as individual indictable offences. They won't see Satanism as an aggravated offence.
Right, I'm with you.
But it would get reported. As a police officer, I dealt with cases of obia because I worked in predominantly Jamaican communities. I dealt with cases of voodoo from the Congolese, mainly the Congolese and the Nigerian communities. Since leaving the police, I've had victims and survivors of Satanism approach me, and I've probably spoken to just as many victims and survivors of SRA than any therapist who specialises in this region. And that the mindset and the mental health of a survivor of SRA is very different to that of a survivor of sort of standard sexual abuse. And
Right.
in as much as a lot of them suffer from a condition known as DID, dissociated identity disorder, which used to be known as multiple personalities.
I see.
And they will have multiple personalities because they're tortured as a child. They're placed under mind control through pain compliance and through fear. Wretched things are done to them, really wretched things. They are electrocuted, they are beaten, they are burned, they are locked in shallow graves for days on end. They're drowned. Drowning is a very common one. They're gang raped, and they're tortured. And what happens is that the mind shuts down, and an alter appears, an alter ego, another character is formulated by the mind that can deal with that pain.
Is that to escape from the reality of what's happened?
Very much so.
You make yourself another person, then that means you're not the person who was tortured and abused, kind of
Yeah,
thing. Is that kind of how it works?
and if you watch the film Split, it's about someone with DID, and they give them names. But the one thing that is that these alters are there to protect the child, and sometimes there's a reluctance for them to amalgamate the alters and then get released from them, because when an alter is in place, that person doesn't feel any fear or any pain because the alter deals with it. And the moment they are released from them alters through therapy and deliverance, because these are demonically placed as well, so there has to be some sort of spiritual intervention that the church can provide, and things like that, because we're dealing with Satanism and it's all to do with deities. Now, it doesn't matter what anyone believes, that's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is this goes on and it's real.
Yeah.
And it is real. And you see it all the time with Hollywood and with the music industry. So many people have sold their soul to Satan.
You hear about this, selling souls to the devil, and like a lot of people think that's just some kind of myth. What does selling your soul to the devil even mean?
Well, it's individually. What do you think it means? What do they think it means? Your soul is up for grabs.
For monetary gain and fame.
For anything.
Okay.
People can sell their soul to have a loved one back in their life, to be strong, to be powerful, to be good in business. It's all about the self. See the essence of Satanism is a worship of self. It's self-worship. So it's
Right.
all about self-serving. So it's a very narcissistic
I was
approach.
going to say narcissistic, yeah.
Yeah, very, very narcissistic approach.
It's a bit of a kind of a sociopath mindset as well.
But
no one else matters but you, kind of thing.
But it's spiritual.
In your opinion and in your work and in your findings, generally speaking, what's the main motivation behind abusing a child? Does it vary?
Well, they enjoy it. They do it because they can, and they want to. There's enjoyment out of it. I can remember one paedophile telling me that he was working in a group of pedos, and they would prey on young boys, mainly from care homes. And he said, we were waiting in a flat for a young boy to be delivered. And he said, have you ever dealt with heroin addicts? And of course, I spent my whole career dealing with heroin addicts.
Yeah.
I said, of course. He said, do you know what they're like when they don't get their gear? I said, of course, I know what they're like. They're impatient and they're agitated. He said, it's the same with us when we don't get a young child. And he said, all of a sudden, the phone would ring and our colleague would reassure us that he's got a boy and he's on his way. And he said, everyone would relax.
Jesus.
And they'd say that once they'd had sex with a child, it made them high. It made them feel good. It made them high. We're dealing with very broken people.
They're not wired right. These people are not wired right.
No, look, people aren't born that way. They're made that way. This nature and nurture thing, listen, yes, you get people, 1 in so many thousand that are born not right. But on the whole, they're made that way. Now, a lot of those that abuse have gone through abuse themselves. Now, in no way am I saying that survivors of abuse become paedophiles, because I don't. But there is a greater propensity for survivors of abuse to go into abuse, and that is a fact. And we can't get away from that. It's a fact.
Yeah.
Now,
There's a clear correlation, basically.
of course, now, when in order for someone to become wholesome, they need to be brought up right. They need uh, a good background. They need a good balanced family. They need a father and a mother. They need warmth, like the Maslow scale of dependency. You know,
Yeah.
you need the basics, and then you need love, and you need to be able to grow, and there needs to be a nurturing. Now, there's a reason why there's an age of consent, and there's a reason why films have got certifications on it, because children should not be exposed to the sexual side of life. They
Yeah,
shouldn't.
absolutely.
It's wrong. But I think the age of consent should be 18, maybe 21. I think 16 is appallingly low, and iPhones now with the pornography on them, we are yet to see the damage that pornography will do to our children. We are yet to see it. It will be, I would say, the single most destructive thing. It will destroy the family. It will destroy sexual relationships. It will cause impotence. It will cause a whole manner of problems, and probably push up the amount of rapes that there are. Now, if you then, at some point in a child's upbringing, you decide to violate that child, there's one thing that happens. An abuse survivor can go on and to live, in many ways, a successful life. We look at a lot of CEOs of companies. There's a greater percentage of CEOs that have narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies because of the need to achieve, right? So we find in the mindset that this is where you get a propensity, I can't remember the word, it's on the tip of my tongue, in that hierarchy of business in the CEO level,
Yeah.
because it's that need to achieve. So a survivor can achieve on an intellectual basis. And we see it with fighters as well, you know, sports personalities. And we also see it with people that join elite regiments, because there's a pain in some of these people. They've been hurt so bad, nothing else will ever hurt them, and there's a need to masculate themselves.
Right.
So you will see people that go into these very, very tough, macho, very disciplined and rigorously harsh conditions and training. You'll see them because there's a need and there's a pain inside them. And you know, academically, people will achieve, and physically they will achieve. There was a documentary about the Falklands War, and there was also another one about the SAS. And what really struck me was, with the Falklands War document, there was two lads that were in the parachute regiment. Both went on to join the SAS, and where everyone else they interviewed, and maybe 10 other ex-soldiers, they all went on to say how they had a lot of mental health problems when they came home, because of the regrets of what they went through, what they did to other people, the killings, and they found it very, very difficult to adjust to civilian life, right? And you can see that they were in torment, and they would have gone through a lot of therapy. But there were two individuals, and they didn't care, and they were like, well, I was dead in. One said I was dead inside anyway, and the moment he said that, I knew where this guy was coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then both then proclaimed that they were abused sexually as children. So this takes me on to the next point. So we can achieve academically if we come from abuse, and we can achieve physically as well. We're not going to be stunted in any way. But the one thing that they cannot stop is that emotionally, these people will stop. The moment they're abused, mainly sexually, their emotional clock stops, right?
Yeah.
So if they were abused at 4 years old, emotionally, bang, they stop. So what you're dealing with is a grown man with the emotional intelligence of a 4-year-old boy. Now, we got to ask ourselves, well, so what? What does that mean? We need emotional intelligence. We need it well rounded and mature in order that we can be responsible and reasonable adults. So if me and you have an argument over something, I will respect your point of view and I will politely and maybe robustly put across my point of view. But in no point would I then start saying, "You're an idiot, you're stupid, I want to kill you, I want to smoke." But a damaged person would. Now, how many people do we know that do that? The moment it doesn't go their way, they're F off, screaming and shouting
Yeah.
because that's a child. Now, if you take a toy away from a little child, what do? I hate you, I hate you. And then
Kicking
they'll,
and screaming, yeah, crying.
but we see this with adults.
Wow.
We see this, we all do. We all know adults like this. And we all know adults that we're trying to explain something and they're not having it. They're like, I don't care, I'm not interested, because that person's broken. So this is one of the ways that you recognize them when people are in stressful situations. You will recognize a damaged child very, very quickly.
With people like that, because that's very interesting. That very interesting psychology. There's obviously different types of abuse. So I think what I'm saying is, can your emotions stop at that age, like you said, just through physical abuse in terms of being hit and knocked about, or being degraded as a person, as
Yeah,
opposed to just
of course.
it's not just sexual abuse, is it?
No,
Okay.
but sexual abuse will have a really deep-rooted, profound effect, and it will also do something else. Sexual abuse, it can heighten the sexuality in someone, so it will open a sexuality up, and that's why you get promiscuity in people. The other ones we've got to look at are domestic violence perpetrators, because domestic violence perpetrators are very cruel people and very controlling. And
Yeah.
that's because there's abandonment issues there. There's rejection issues that go back to childhood. So,
Wow.
Ellie, let's stick with men because women do it as well. But let's just stick with men, for example. Men that beat up their wives, they're damaged, broken, cruel individuals. And can they stop? Well, it depends. If they were hurt and abused at a very young age, you can't change them. If it was in the teenage years, you stand a chance. But if they're abused in their early infant years, no way. And the younger they were hurt, the more spiteful and nasty they become.
The protection of children is the most important thing on this planet, isn't it?
Well, you'd like to think so. There's a brilliant interview that one guy gives, and he said, all I'd ever known was being in a care home and being made to suck men's cocks and to be raped. That's all I ever knew. He was thrown out in the streets at the age of 16. He said, I was homeless. I didn't know what to do. So he said, so I did what I knew. I went straight to public toilets so I could meet men. I could suck them off to get money to survive. And I was living a rent boy homosexual life. He said, one day I had some money and I went to the pub and I met a girl and I kissed her and I realised I'm not gay. There are a lot of homosexuals that come from trauma. So it's a very complex topic indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, there are guys that that came out of this, and women as well, that no, they were straight and they never ever caused any abuse to anyone at all for the rest of their lives. But there would have been a huge amount of damage. A lot of the people that come from these care homes where they were abused sexually, they even when they got married, I've spoken to partners and wives of people, and they said, it's been a nightmare. That the guy will wake up at 3 a.m. screaming and just run out the house, sometimes naked, screaming. Once you understand sexual abuse and childhood trauma, you start understanding society.
Yeah.
So, for example, I dealt with one case where a girl would only eat mashed up food.
Okay.
And it was quite simple. Why does she eat mashed up food? Because something solid has been put in her mouth that shouldn't have been put in there.
Whoa.
And again, look at anorexia. Anorexia, I control what goes in my mouth, not you.
I've never ever, and this is why it's very interesting to have you on. I've never, and many people never would have even thought about things like that.
But what about overeating? If I make myself fat and ugly, no one will come near me. And
Wow.
the other way of looking at it is when a child is frightened, say they're in bed and they're frightened, what's the first thing they do? They hide under the duvet,
Oh yeah, yeah.
right? Now, a duvet is a thick layer, right? It's a protective layer. Now, also, a thick layer of fat can be conceived as a protective layer. So it protects them as well. So there's a
Wow.
need to put
It's
that
very, very
but
psychological.
but a lot of it, when you look at it, it makes sense. It's very lateral as well. You think, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Self harming. Okay, when you self harm, endorphins are pushed into the body. But there's another way of looking at it. I hurt me more than you hurt me. And years
I'm in
ago,
control. I'm in control.
I hurt me more than you hurt me.
Yeah.
So they're just reliving that trauma, but now with them in charge.
Something that really worries me a lot is social media and TikTok, especially. I think it's toxic landscape. And yeah, my kid asked, "Can I have it? Can I have it? Can I have it?" I was like, "No, no," and for the third time, no. So I want to ask you: do you think that social media is making it easier for children to be targeted and groomed and sexualized?
Sexualized, no two ways about it. We're seeing a huge sexualization of children, and that is destroying their minds.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
One of the biggest things, Luke, and we have to say this, is single parenting. It is
Okay.
probably, you've got to attack the family if you need to control the society. And single parenting, I was a single parent, and I'm saying now it's dysfunctional and it does not work. And there's a terrifying statistic that a child is 60 times more likely to be sexually abused with the presence of a step parent. Right? 60 times, 60.
60.
60, not
Wow.
once, not twice. And 80% of all sexual abuse of children goes on within the home. So we don't start blaming the wandering paedophile or the opportunist on a bus or anything like. Yes, of course these things happen. Most abuse goes on, sexual abuse goes on in the home by people that are known to the child.
Often your abuser is sat in the living room downstairs.
It's known to them, and there's another thing because women do abuse. And we see quite a few cases that come out where women abuse. And the horrible thing is that when women abuse, and it's usually women against young boys, that the victim is 6 times more likely to become an abuser themselves if they're abused by a woman
There's a
than if
major
they're abused by,
correlation.
yeah, and women abuse with a lot of spite and viciousness that you don't get with men. So when you get sexual abuse by a woman, it's done with a lot of spite.
I'm going to interject there with a case that I wanted to speak about, which kind of is a good link by what you just said about a female abuser, because I've mentioned this to you before. I made a documentary with one of the Moors murders victims' brothers. So John Kilbride, the second victim, his brother Terry. We did a documentary together. It's on this channel for anybody that does want to see that. It's one of the first documentaries that I did. And I got a very, very powerful insight into the story, and a lot of things I learned. I actually had letters in my hand from Ian Brady. I read them. That's quite an eerie thing. So I want to just jump in with the Moors murders and with the kind of couples that kill. What's your knowledge on the Moors murders? And do you think that any one led the other? And also, I know this is quite loaded, but do you believe? And I've had this conversation with Terry, rest in peace. Do you believe there was more victims of the Moors murders?
Oh yeah, I think whenever you get couples who kill, such as the Wests, Brady and Hindley, that there's a bigger thing going on. And I think a lot of them were procuring children, not for their own ends, but for a big organisation, which is what the satanic ritual stuff, because there's always a need for children to be brought in. So the woman will play an important role because they can be like the mother or and they can make the young girls, because the young kids are what is needed. They like them under the age of 11, because once a child starts getting into puberty, they change very
They're not
quickly.
interested then.
They're not, and there is a spiritual reason behind that as well. And the satanic stuff, they like them usually around the age of 5 to 8. Girls are more difficult to entice because boys are always out playing, and girls tend not to be that brave socially. So when
Yeah.
you've got a woman in there, that's very, very, very sinister indeed. I think the way they have the run of luck that they have isn't luck. They're working for a bigger network, a bigger organization. I definitely believe that the Wests were getting kids. There, around Fred West, there was something like 30 missing people around Fred West alone. And Fred West was part of what's called the Barn Club. His son said that he would meet up and they would take people to the barn and torture them, which is what happens in Satanism. And some of the corpses, the skeletal recovery that they had on the West case, they were very occultic. There was like bindings around the mouth, things inserted in the skull, which would heavily indicate an occultic link. Ian Brady, again, he came from abuse. He'd been through the care system. He'd been through the reform school system. So he was a very broken person anyway.
Yeah, came from the slums in Scotland.
Yeah, and he didn't really know who he was or what he was. There was some terrible things happened to him in his upbringing. He wasn't wanted. So, they're breeding a monster anyway. But then I think they generally get connected to a higher network, which is why you get police cover-ups and things like that occur, because you're starting to get into very, very dark, sinister territory. And like I said, once you understand SRA, so many questions start getting answered, especially in respect to missing persons.
When I spoke to John Kilbride's brother about Hindley and Brady, he said, I think that she was worse than him. And he said, without her, Brady couldn't have done what he did, because she's the one that got them all into the car, putting on the sweet voice, the blonde, nice 20-odd-year-old lady. Can you help me with these boxes? Can you help me find this glove on the moors? And then she drove them. Brady was there following on his motorbike, ready to do what he was about to do. But for a female, it's always more shocking when you hear about females abusing, because of that. They should have that maternal instinct, shouldn't they?
But it depends where you're coming from. If like, I worked on the street with prostitutes, drug addicts, sex abusers, and paedophiles, literally on the street for many, many years. So there is nothing that anyone can tell me that will shock me or make me question it, because I've pretty much seen and heard the whole lot of it. But someone who's not come from that world, of course, if it's not your reality, yeah, you're going to be shocked. But just because you don't believe in something or it's not been your reality does not mean it doesn't exist. When you look at these missing kids, I mean, you look at the case of the missing girl called Moira Anderson that went missing in Coatbridge in Scotland, and what was going on around that, and who was living in Coatbridge and connected to people linked to that. Well, Fred West was at the same time.
Right.
So the connections are unbelievable when you start piecing these people together.
Putting the dots together.
They are all connected. They are all known. There's been a series of young boys that went missing in Belfast and Donegal, and in the 70s, and the intelligence services were put out there to deliberately rubbish claims that it was satanic ritual abuse, because the information that was coming in from people in Belfast and Donegal in era was that these kids were being kidnapped and tortured in a ritual abuse scenario. And the intelligence services had to try and rubbish them claims. Now, there was a guy that he was set with a task of doing that, right? And he was a captain in the intelligence corps. And he started speaking out, and he was chucked in prison for 10 years for a murder he didn't even commit. So there's a need to silence these things.
If this kind of stuff is happening at the top, there's not much hope for the rest of the people, is there, really?
Well, look, there's always hope. Your mind is like a parachute. It will only work when it's open, right?
Okay.
Open your mind. These things have been going on for a long, long time, but people won't. They shut their minds to things because it's convenient for them to do so. So we all like to sit round and chat, not so much now because people don't go to the pub and things like that. But years ago, we'd go to the pub and we'd talk about current affairs.
Yeah.
People don't do it, but there is nothing more poignant and relevant than talking about why society is in the way it's in, and that's because of child abuse. You try talking to people about child abuse, they don't want to hear it, and there's two reasons they don't want to hear, right? Because it affects a third of the population.
A
So if
third.
there's a
Wow.
third of the population, so if there's 9 of you at a table, there's a good chance 3 of you have gone through abuse. Do you really want to hear that? Maybe not. And also, there's going to be people in there that are paedophiles, and they don't want to talk about it either because that's their little secret.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's the number one factor in the way that we're in a dog shit society that we're in. And unless we talk about it and we expose it and we make efforts to change things and we keep our families strong and we believe that this goes on, then it will never change. It will only get worse and worse and worse.
I did a tenure for about 6 months working in a children's home as a support worker, and didn't really know what I was going into. It was during COVID, and I've got a chefing background. That kind of collapsed, so I had a connection to be able to be a support worker, which I was very passionate about when I was in there. But what I did see a lot of was, especially the young girls, they were they were more sexualized at a young age than they should be, and finding out through working and through files and this, that, and the other, that they've been abused, they've been groomed, they've been trafficked, and this stuff, like, it does need to be spoken about, and it's good that you do raise awareness about this, because I mean, child
But
safety is the number one thing in the world,
but
clearly.
but but we got to look at this thing now. Now I worked with this for a long time, and these girls are put into the care homes. They're not like care homes of old where they were big institutions and they were gated and everything else. These are individual concerns now, which are money making, and everything is being outsourced and PLC'd. And Tony Blair did this. So again, don't ever be fobbed up that the Tories ruin everything and Labour don't. It's nonsense. They're all the same. It's like what's his name? George Galloway said that they're the same cheeks on the same arse. You know,
Same cheeks and the same hat. What you say? Different cheeks and the same ass.
yeah, red and blue, left and right. Don't get caught up in that. It's a nonsense. It's all a nonsense. Now these girls get put in a care because okay, people go to me. They say the child stealing state. Yeah, but if kids do go into care for the wrong that are stolen sometimes, and it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. It does. But on the whole, social services get caught up in the family because the family comes to notice, usually through dysfunctionality. And now there is a massive drive to put people in care because it's a way that years ago social services were centrally funded by the Home Office. Now it is all coming through income revenue generation, and they get that each time a kid's put in the care. So there is an overzealous approach to put kids in care now. So it's even more important for families to do the right thing and keep social services at arm's length because there's every chance if they get away in, you're going to lose your kids
Yeah.
you know, but let's get it right. 80% of all abuse, sexual abuse, goes on in the home. So a lot
No.
of these girls have been abused in the home by dad, by uncle, by brother, and they go into these care homes, and these care homes aren't going to look after them. They're money making, so the girls will go missing, and there'll be other girls that will be working as prostitutes in saunas. Or private. It's even worse now because of the internet. People can do it themselves, pimp themselves via the internet. Whereas before they physically need to be part of something, now it can be done online. And these guys will pick them up. The girls will also encourage the younger girls to get involved in it, and there's money, so they'll have like a Romeo boyfriend who will turn around and say, look, I love you and all that, but look, come with me, start having sex with a girl, but come with me, look, if you do this, we'll get money and we can do things together. So he then gets her to have sex with someone for money, which is pimping. Get
Yeah.
your friend involved. So that girl will then say to her mate, look, if you get put in care, you can live with me. Your mum can't tell you what to do, and we'll get money and we can go out and we can do this. And then what happens is they end up usually smoking weed and then getting them on crack cocaine. And then the addiction starts. So they just carry on with it because they want the drugs. So this is how it starts. These care homes, it's so easy for these girls to get caught up in this. And sometimes that's what they know. But then once they kill it, that their sexuality, there is a need for these girls. These people want sex with children. Those who have sex with kids are highly inadequate. They can't sexually please a mature person. They pick on children because there's a weakness in them,
Right.
right? And there's a power in it as
I was
well.
going to say about
Yeah,
power. Yeah. Control, power.
control and power, and they're broken. They're very broken people, and that's always a commodity with children. Always, always, always. And that's what it is. And of course, they're sexualized because that is now part of their DNA.
Do you know these online sting groups that basically they set up
Yeah,
profiles as like an underage as a minor, and they go on certain apps and whatnot.
yeah.
The groups I'm talking about.
Predator hunters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, the kind of predator
yeah.
hunters. Now, obviously, like I've watched a few different ones, and they say they do it because the police they don't have the resources
No.
to deal with how much goes on. What's your thoughts on these
Yeah,
sting groups?
yeah.
Are you massively behind them?
100% behind them. I think
Yeah,
brilliant. I think they should be given more powers. And the other thing with them, and I do some online training with one group in the south of England. I teach some statement taking skills because there'll be stuff that they'll be missing. What I'm not a fan of is when they start denigrating and humiliating the paedophiles they catch because
yeah. It's not
you know
professional.
it's not professional. And listen, you're going to get the case thrown out with that
Yeah,
behaviour.
I totally agree with you there.
If you're going to do it, do it the right way because
Yeah,
that's because people used to say to me, when you get these paedophiles, don't you want to smash their faces in? Well, what's the point of that? I'm looking at further down the line doing a professional job, right? Getting that person and catering for all their needs. So if they need a cup of tea, they're getting a cup of tea. If they need this, because I don't want any criticism for how I've treated them, but also I want that person to know that I could be a way out for them. So when they're in prison, they need help, right? And I'm going to present myself and say, right, you want help, you've got to give me more paedophiles. So that person potentially could give me 5 or 6 paedophiles.
very good work, John.
I smash the granny out of that bloke. I'll lose that case and get no one.
Yeah,
I work that person properly. I hate them, and I will destroy them. And good, good. So what? But I want to know who's in their gang. And what I would say to these predator groups, because I'm totally behind them, and I think
yeah,
they've got a lot better than what they were. I think you should have some sort of national regulatory body that governs you. I think you should all be warranted. You should be given mechanical restraint, things like that. But also, you've got to look at intelligence, 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 right? And forensics, forensics, forensics. So when some of them people that you'll be catching will be potential child murderers, right? Their intention
yeah.
might not just be to have sex with a kid. That might be to 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 rape and dismember that child, and they will be part of a bigger, dangerous paedophilic organisation. And with the right approach, you could uncover that. So I would say to them, think forensics, think a bigger picture with these people, right? They will present themselves as and they all do the same. They all start crying, and I'm glad you caught me. I needed
Crying
this.
because they've got caught, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, and they're manipulators. You see,
Yeah.
they're deviants, and they will try all sorts of things. But you're going to also one day come across one of these people that's heavily connected. So be careful and do the right thing, because if you don't, you could all end up in court for perverting the course of justice or whatever. But I think they're great. I've got a good friend of mine. He's a tough guy, and he's goes along. He's done about 120 of these now, and
Nice.
he he loves it. He goes all over the place doing it, and
It's
you
great.
know,
It's great to get these off the street. But there was one I watched recently, and it really like ground my gears because they didn't do it properly. Like they got to the address, they got actually invited into the house, and at first they were professional, and they said, "So you're inviting us in? We're not forcing ourselves in. It's all on record." Da, da, da. And I was thinking, "Okay, well done. You're doing it right." Then they got in, and then this predator who they'd stung, there was he was a fan of a particular music artist. I can't remember now. And every 30 or 40 seconds, they would drop in a pun regards
yeah,
to a song, and they would insult the person. And I'm
yeah,
thinking, you're doing basically unpaid detective work, and you're acting as like you're doing the work of the authorities in protecting our children, but you're totally like shitting on your own work
yeah, yeah.
by
It's
insulting him and by antagonizing. Because, like you said before, John, like that gives the predator their own case to kind of
yeah.
rebuttal the sting people.
Yeah, it's wrong, and it can get a case thrown out. There's one where they caught a midget, and they got him to kick himself in the head, and they were all laughing. When we had to work in this environment, right, you had to be psychometrically tested, and it was very rigorous and very clever because we wanted to weed out people that really had come from abuse. Because if you've come from abuse and you start working with abusers, they call it the Superman complex, where you think you're going to go there to save others, but what it does, any little problem, you magnify it in your mind, and you become easily tormented by these people, and it's unhealthy.
Yeah,
And so you are getting survivors of abuse that have got an axe to grind against paedophiles getting in on this, and it becomes very unbalanced very quickly, and you do see it with them, and you've got to keep that distance and that professional disdain, and you've got to always think evidence, forensics, court case, always, and
yeah.
intelligence. And they have that golden opportunity when they arrest someone, that the person might cough up something else, or even give them some evidence on a bigger crime. But when you start humiliating people, you just cut all cords to that. It's childish, and again, it's probably a very damaged, triggered person
Yeah.
that thinks that they're protecting the world from the beasts that hurt them, and actually, it's not working. They're doing the opposite. So,
I think those groups should take your advice on that, and remain professional, because then more of these predators will get put away. So
and there should be some proper training for them. The police should be training them, and there should be a vetting process as well. But
yeah,
that
yeah,
aside, it's wrong that it's got to such a state where civilians have to then take the bull by the horns and use their any person powers of arrest and detention because the police either don't or can't be bothered to do it. It's a damning indictment of how we are in our society in respect to
we're very
criminal
lucky to
justice.
have these groups that go out and
Yeah.
do this professional job. But you know what I remember once, like one of the first kind of public one was Stinson Hunter. Do you remember him? And there's a guy called Stinson Hunter, and he was like the first one, the paedophile hunter. And he was very, very, very professional, by the way. And they made a documentary about him. He kind of started it all, I would say, in my opinion. Now, one of the predators that he caught ended up killing themselves. And then he was on a talk show, and they were talking about these stings and this, that, and the other. And somebody said to him, because of what you did, talking to the person who's trying to protect our children, because of what you did, this person killed themselves. And he said, no, because this person killed themselves because of what they did.
Yeah, well, look, this is something that detectives that investigate paedophilic crime encounter all the time. It is not uncommon for someone on bail, and it's usually on bail, to kill themselves. It's not uncommon. It happens with immense regularity. And I can remember there was a girl in my office, one of her guys that she had on bail, one of her suspects, he did, and she went to pieces, and we sort of, that we'd have a little bit of a chat over it and all that, but it happened all the time. So, it's their choice. We all have choices. That person chose to kill themselves. They know exactly what they did.
Yeah.
They're manipulators. They're
They don't want to go
liars.
to prison, do they?
And they destroy. Well, they know what they've done. And look, when you catch them for the smallest of negligible percentage of the crimes they've committed, and also usually what they get caught for is so minor compared to what their mindset is. So, in order for a crime to come to being, there's two things. There's the actus rea and the mens rea, right? And it's Latin. So the actus rea is the actual physical aspect of committing a crime. The mens rea is the mental intention, the criminal intention to commit that crime. And some of these people, some of these paedophiles, when they meet the kid, they are actually in their mind. Their mens rea is not just to meet them for sex; is to mutilate and destroy and kill that kid. And we had a case where one guy, and it was a dilemma was put up, and he was a school teacher, and he was so popular with the kids, and he'd taken on this class, and he started teaching them cricket, and he had a couple of kids there that were problems at home, and he really tutored them and nurtured them through. And he started coming to notice, and what he'd done was he'd arranged to meet one of the boys after school, and there was this discussion, should and he was caught with child pornography as well. And it was all going through the forensic testing. Should he be suspended from his duty? And it was put to the group, and I said, "Well, yeah, because he's been flagged up as a danger."
Yeah.
And he said, "But that there is nothing that shows that this guy has abused any kid. He's really popular, and he's looked at child porn, and he's deeply regretful. So why should we destroy his life?" And that seemed to be the thing that came from the educational side of the multi-agency group, right?
The child porn's enough to fuck him off.
Well, this is where it gets better. So, and then one of my colleagues produces a diary,
Oh shit!
right? And this diary was seized. See, this is the one thing these hunters don't get into that mindset and to the interview stage and things like that. And the diary, he had actually planned to meet this boy, take him to a wooded area. There was going to be 5 members of his little covert group, and they had lined a boot of a car out with cellophane, and they were going to rape and mutilate this kid. And there was drawings on exactly how they were going to mutilate him, what they were going to do to his anus, and how they were going to cut limbs off. And that was it, But that was it. That was in this guy's mindset. That was his mens rea. That's what he ultimately wanted to do. But on the outside, it was like he's a very benevolent guy, and it was all that. So
Yeah.
you never know what's beneath that surface. They are very manipulative people.
How has this affected your life? Like knowing what you know, because it's you know a lot of dark, very heavy, disturbing stuff. Does this affect your day-to-day life? How do you cope with the knowledge that you have? How do you get through?
No, it's not so bad now. I mean, but because I'm on the other side of it, it's given me like a sixth sense now, and I can look at cases and I can see a different side to it because I understand the base level of human nature a lot better than if I was a civilian, for example.
Yeah.
And I had the immense privilege of working with criminal profilers. In recent years, I've worked with one of the top 10 FBI profilers into child murderers.
Oh wow.
She is the most incredible woman you've ever met, and she knows. And she's the only one that will deal, with the victims and the murderers. And she's got a 90% success rate in non reoffending, in preventing reoffending of paedophiles and sex murderers. 90%.
She's a FBI, is she?
Yeah, she's fantastic. She's a contractor for the FBI, but she works for Interpol. She's worked for the British government. She's worked for the French government, the Belgian government, everywhere. She knows more about the mindset of a child murderer than anyone. And she's become a very close friend, and we work closely with many things. So it's good in this way because I can help people now. I'm in a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
position to help, and that's what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to help and put people in the right direction and advise them. So in that way, it's very fulfilling. In another way, yes, there is a darkness in it because there's no smiles in this topic.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
the people that are affected for it, they take that damage to the grave with them. They struggle with relationships, parenting, keeping a job down because they can't trust anyone. So many of them are self-employed.
Yeah.
And there's another horrible statistic with mainly the men that have been abused as young children is that they can't work in communal environments because they've been so damaged that they defecate themselves. So they
Oh,
couldn't work
wow.
in an office, for example, because they've got no control over their bowels because their anus has been so irreparably damaged. A few years ago, when I was actively investigating with the police and I was dealing with victims of terrible child abuse, it was heavily depressing because you're going face to face with the child victims, and it was hard. It was very hard, and it took a really certain strong individual. But the backlash for that was that because we didn't work in groups, we worked in pairs. We
Yeah.
tended to work horrendously long hours. The risks were immensely high. The safeguarding aspects were high, so we couldn't just walk away. We had to protect our victims and make sure they were safe because they could get killed or abducted or anything. So it was a long day. Um, and we didn't get to really meet, socialize, and dissipate our torment. So many of us became alcoholics. And that is a real negative side effect of that work. I mean, there was one girl I worked with. She said she bought a new bed, and she said I've not slept in it for 2 years. I said, well, what happened? She said I just wake up on the floor. So she'd go home, just drink wine, and collapse on the floor. There was two registered alcoholics.
Is that because she's taking the experience of the job home with her?
Yeah, of course, of
What's
course.
in the head, what's in the mind? Yeah.
And that's what you do. They say you can't take it home. Well, it's impossible. It's
Yeah.
absolutely impossible not to take it home because you're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with children, and they were passionate about what they were doing. They were brilliant investigators, and they were very sharp on the ball. And they were without a doubt the best interviewers. I went on to teach interviewing skills to police forces all around the world. You know, I've taught the Jamaican police, I've taught the Channel Islands police, the police from Dubai, everywhere, interview skills, of which the Metropolitan Police was probably one of the best. You know, we was very good at what we did. But when you've got the child abuse investigators and the vulnerable people, we were another league. We were exceptionally good, you know, because children, you can't lead them. You have to be very sterile with your questioning, you
Yeah.
know, and so it takes a skill that is phenomenal, and it works. It's a very powerful, you know, way of working, and it's superb. It's an excellent way of eliciting any information without leading that person and keeping it legally sterile, so they can't attack it and throw the case out. Because if they throw the case out, then that's a child rapist on the street. So we was very good.
What's your opinion on when abusers or predators, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all types of child abuse? What do you feel about the sentences that they do get? Do you feel like they're strong enough
I mean, it varies
generally?
because some do get big sentences, but others get ridiculously low sentences. They're an insult, you know. So you'll get more if you make a transphobic comment, for example, than you would if you rape someone. So on the whole,
That's
they're
ridiculous, isn't it?
they're appallingly low. So yeah, I think the justice system really needs to put children first, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
I
you
think
know,
if you rape a child, I think that you should be off. That's it. You're done with. But that'll never happen again in this country, I doubt. But you do that to a child at a young age, at any age really, but at a young age, their life's over. But you get to go on with yours.
well, well,
It's
well,
not fair.
well, when we was a fully functioning investigative organisation, historic child abuse cases had a 2% success rate in the Crown Courts. 2%.
Wow, that's very, very low.
Now, how things are now, they won't even attain that. You know, and so someone said to me the other day, I did an interview with Channel 4, and they said, do you think things have got better or worse? I said, they've got infinitely. I don't think we will fully understand how bad they've got. I think if you've destroyed a child, that's it. You should be taken out of the game. If you've raped a child, you should never be allowed back in society. It shouldn't happen.
I think that is I think that's quite a poignant place to kind of wrap this up. And that's like kind of a good conclusion, really. It's been fascinating talking to you and getting your experience and your insight and the lessons that I've learned off you. Some quite insightful, some very scary, some that make you think a lot more. Appreciate the work that you do. I know you work with vulnerable people as well, and you know you're giving a lot back to society, and you genuinely trying to help. I want to let people know that we are going to be giving 30% of any monetization of this video to. I'm going to split it with you, so 15 for you, 15 for me. I am giving mine to the. Going back to the Moors murders, Terry Kilbride, John's brother, he had a charity that he gave all of his donations to. So I'm going to honour that. I'm going to give it to his. And is there any charity you've got in mind?
Yeah, there's a charity called the Big Love Foundation. It's run by an ex-family court barrister. And this woman, out of kindness and out of her own pocket, she gives free I can't explain how important her work is. Free legal advice at a barrister level to those that are struggling with the family courts. You know, they're trying to keep their families together, and the family courts are trying to take their kids. And this woman, she's a lifeline. And you know, because so many people that are going through these things do kill themselves as well. There's so many parents who have lost their kids, go on to take their own lives. And this woman, her name's Patty Boyle, the Big Love Foundation, and she gives free and independent legal advice to those who desperately need it. And the alternative is that they pay tens of thousands of pounds for the advice that she gives for free. And so, you know, my support, my love, and any money I get will go straight to her.
Thank you for your time. It's been very
pleasure,
very insightful. It's nice to finally get face to face and virtually and talk about something which I'm very passionate about. I've been called an overprotective father, and I actually don't think that an overprotective father exists. In this world.
No.
And
you're doing the right thing.
I'm going to raise it even more.
yeah. And the fact is, you're a father. And you know, we need fathers. Our society lacks fathers. And I say to men, please don't leave your children. They're the most important thing you'll ever get in your life.
Totally agree, mate.
Nothing comes a close second. Please, even if relationships don't work out, make sure you're part of that child's life.
Thank you for your time. Everybody, if you do enjoy the channel and the content, please hit subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, tell me and John your thoughts on the video. If there's anything you want to say, anything you want to ask, put it in the comments. So again, one more time, thank you very much, John. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
Great to speak to you. And as always, peace out.